Councillor Cleary, 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for your wise words introducing my speech. I'll take them on board. Okay, I'll begin by confirming the Green Group's support for the budget, including the additions secured by the Greens at Budget P&R. These remove those proposals that would have impacted on our waste management, our environmental health and our bulky waste collection services, would have further eroded our efforts on recycling, for which the official auditor has quite rightly highlighted as an area where we are failing badly. To repeat what I said at Policy and Resources, less than 1/3 of waste in Wirral is sent for recycling, and we are ranked 285th out of 338 councils in England for recycling. We can and must do better at reducing the waste that is generated in Wirral, reusing what should be reused and effectively recycling what remains. Landfilling and burning waste, Mr. Mayor, are the only things we should confine to the dustbin. Now, in the next few minutes, I want to cover 3 key areas about the budget. Those are the national context, the budget process itself, and how the budget sits within the agreed priorities of the Wirral Plan. Now, I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, I won't be the only person tonight that laments the needless waste and stress inflicted on local authorities by the annual government settlement. It is frankly cruel to deny certainty about our funding for the year ahead until a few months before we meet to set our budget. This forces councils to engage in endless firefighting around worst-case scenarios. It impacts our staff and our residents. It is inefficient and wasteful. Mr. Mayor, we need a long-term funding settlement. And that's not just a short-term financial issue. It is crucial if we are to effectively deliver our agreed policy priorities. For example, Wirral, like many councils, has pledged to be a net zero borough. This is a vital part in bringing the country closer to its own net zero targets. To achieve this and address social and environmental priorities, such as an end to fuel poverty, we need long-term, secure funding. Instead, what we get is annual settlements and the farcical merry-go-round of councils competing with each other for dwindling pots of so-called levelling up funds. Mr. Mayor, this is another example of the government's juvenile relationship with local authorities. It has to change. But managing such a dysfunctional relationship with central government is not easy. But we can and should look at our own procedures to examine where we might do better. And in doing so, it is helpful to refer back to advice received from our recent peer review with the Local Government Association and comments from the Independent Assurance Panel. Now, the LGA has advised, and I quote, "It is essential that there is a mature cross-party working between groups to take forward the Council's improvement." Yet at the very beginning of this budget-setting process, Labour and Conservative councillors voted to restrict the membership of the Budget Working Group, cynically and unfairly targeting the Green Group's preferred choice. That isn't mature, and it's the opposite of what our peers are advising. However, recent developments have been more collaborative and constructive, as referenced helpfully by the leader in her speech. They have been crucial in securing a budget that most groups can support. So hopefully this marks a turning point which will benefit all the residents of Wirral going forward. In terms of the process driven by officers, I have 3 brief points. Firstly, it is pleasing to see that our papers tonight include a full list of budget pressures on page 180, as requested by Councillor Bird at the Budget P&R Committee meeting. Transparency on pressures is essential if we are to understand how the Council plans to spend additional income. Councillors should not have to resort to freedom of information requests to view the budget pressures. Secondly, last year we were presented at the beginning of the budget process with medium, low and high case scenarios. This year, only an unrealistically pessimistic budget gap of £49 million was initially presented. This was repeated in committee reports even after the independent panel had specifically criticised it as too high in early December. They were right, Mr Mayor. Not only is the final gap some £17 million less, but it has been bridged without resorting to cuts in much valued frontline services. This has been apparent for several months. Promoting an excessively pessimistic budget gap has inevitably led to heightened and unnecessary stress for staff and residents. It is inappropriate, Mr Mayor, for members of the public to be misled about threats to libraries, leisure centres and youth services when members know that such threats no longer apply. And finally, Mr Mayor, on this topic, Green councillors have engaged regularly and constructively with officers to discuss our priorities, our ideas and our questions about the budget. I'd like to place on record my thanks to officers for the professional and helpful manner in which those discussions were conducted. This is a better budget because of that. My remaining comments, Mr Mayor, relate to how the budget is delivering in terms of the priorities of the Wirral Plan. Our capital spend, £132 million budgeted for next year, is critical if we are to lead the transformational change that will address our social, environmental and financial pressures. There is so much potential in Wirral to respond to the climate and biodiversity crisis that also create a fairer, a more attractive and a more prosperous place. More support for nature and tree planting with all the benefits to human well-being that delivers. Much more investment in green travel infrastructure that improves our health, cleans our air and allows more efficient use of land rather than endless car parks. Investing in our key assets to reduce energy consumption and support the leisure and learning of our residents. Every library and leisure facility that closes is more cost for our health, police and social services. We can't let short-term financial pressures deflect us from our longer-term goals. We have superb regeneration ambitions. The new Cleveland Street Master Plan is just the latest example. But I have two key concerns. Firstly, the pace of delivery in key investments for active travel and town centre regeneration needs to increase. Inflation has melted away so much of our hard-won regeneration funds. Secondly, deferring capital expenditure to maintain and improve our key assets is a race to the bottom. At P&R Committee, such delays have sometimes been presented in a positive light due to interest rate savings. This is short-term thinking which works against the aspirations of the Wirral Plan. Capital spend can't just be about regeneration. We have to preserve and improve what we already have, and that means so much to our residents. So in concluding, Mr Mayor, just a few brief comments in response to a few things that have already been said. Firstly, the Hoylake Golf Resort was always opposed by the Green Party. Secondly, we have a committee system. We've been a no overall control council since 2019. So we are all responsible for the budget that comes before us tonight. If the Conservative group isn't happy with the budget proposals, it needs to bring forward some alternative, and you haven't done that. We're all responsible for what this council delivers. And finally, Councillor Anderson talked about plundering reserves. The papers in front of us tonight increase reserves. They increase contingencies. I don't agree. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Pat.